All right. So, well, it's great to be here. In fact, it's great to be back in Australia, and in fact, I'm actually coming to the end now of this tour, which has been an amazing tour, but it's involved a wonderful, fantastic welcome from everybody we've come across. I'm not sure, actually, we had quite such a packed house as this, so so thank you, Sydney, for all turning up, including anybody who's following on online. So I have been asked to talk about the past and the present and the future, and I have got roughly 20 minutes to do it in, which that means a bit over 6 minutes for each of the past and the present and the future. So obviously I'm going to have to sort of choose the things that I go into, because otherwise I could go on rabbiting for hours. And what I hope will happen, start with, is that what I'll do is just provide a framework for thinking about the past, the present, and the future, particularly the future. I know that there are some people watching Twitter for questions coming in on those, and so in fact, the piece that I'm most looking forward to is the panel later, when we get to discuss some of those questions and others. So let me take you back then. First, the past. Okay, inventing the World Wide Web. What does that mean? Well, I suppose it means, in a way, well, I should say that I was very lucky to be born. So I was born in 1955, computers were just starting, and my two parents met actually putting together one of the first computers, the Ferranti Mark I, which was created by Manchester University, the first computer to be sold commercially. And so they were full of the excitement of the idea of a computer. The idea that a computer is a thing which, instead of being designed for one purpose, can do whatever you can imagine. So that's my background. Many years later, having played around, ended up as being a software engineer, ended up having a job at CERN, this fantastic high-end geophysics lab in Switzerland. I found that I was frustrated by the lack, if you like, the lack of World Wide Web. We can say it now, it was difficult to explain then. But, if you like, what was, you go into a meeting and somebody would present you, there'd be memos and minutes and all the documents and the manuals of all the many machines we had. And often they'd be actually in paper, but they would have been produced, of course, in those days, by 1989, they had been produced on computers. So somewhere there was a computer disk, and on that computer was the computer disk was going round and round and round, because they did in those days, and on that disk was a file. And as it turned out in 1989, not only had we got to the place where most documents were produced on computers, we'd also got to the time that the internet, which had been invented 20 years beforehand, had spread to the US. Now, for a lot of time, spread across the US to Europe, where I was. Now, for a lot of people, the moment I sort of distinguish between the internet and the web, they says, wait a moment, so what's the difference? Okay, so they start with the internet was invented back in 1969. So hold your hand up, who here was here in 1969? All right, so not everybody. So you won't all remember, but for those of you who were in 1969, it was very cool. Many cool things happened. Vint Cerf and company created this. They sent the first messages around the ARPANET. They created the Internet Protocol, and which became they put TCP, the Transmission Control Protocol, on it, and they basically invented the internet. They had a problem that they had various networks which were local to individual sites, and they connected these sites together by telephone wires and got the computers they programmed the computers so that if you sent a little package, that's a little thing with a bit bigger than a tweet, but not much bigger than a tweet, about 1,000 characters. Around, if you send a packet, you'd have to break a larger message up into little ones, and they designed a method whereby you just put on the number of the computer you wanted to send it to, and you just send it onto the local network, and a computer would pick it off that, send it down the right phone line, send it onto another network, and each time this message got to a computer, the computer will look at the address, where it was going, and think, I know where to send that. And it would get shuffled across the net and end up at the other end. So the net result was that you could write a program running on this computer. You could write a program on this computer, and those two computers could communicate. Those two programs could communicate. That was the internet. That was 1969. Okay, moon landing, Led Zeppelin, all kinds of cool things. An amazing year. Now, there's a brand of jeans has decided to immortalize it. So that was 1969, and in fact, a lot more people were excited about Led Zeppelin and the moon landing than the internet at that point. But during those, it spread, and various people used the internet to build various things, like, for example, email. You could, by the time in 1989 I was working at CERN, we had email. We had a thing called Network News, which was kind of like a sort of online sort of magazine subscription thing with Network News Transfer Protocol, and so quite a lot of work had been done with the internet. It was just getting to the point where I was allowed to use it in Europe, and so there I was, frustrated by the fact that we had all these documents on different machines, and the machines were in fact connected to networks, and those networks were connected up generally to the internet. And so what's wrong with this picture? The fact that I have to go and learn about how each computer user works. I maybe have to log onto one computer and then connect through the internet to log onto another computer, and then find my way around some strange documentation system to find what I want. And then maybe even if I'm able to bring back the file which has got the document on it I want, when I've got it back, chances are it was written in some weird language that my computer can't understand. Whereas, now I didn't do a computer science degree when I went to Oxford all those years ago. There weren't computer science degrees, but I did physics. And when you do physics, you are taught to generalize. A physicist tries to think up physical laws which are as general as possible. And when you look at a problem like that, all these different things, you think, if you generalize that, we can imagine a very quite simple documentation system in a way in which all these other documentation systems could seem to be part. So that was the plan, and I wrote a memo about it because somebody said you should write a memo about it. Because there was nothing else. CERN's a physics lab. They don't make global hypertext systems. They do physics experiments. If I'd done a physics experiment, they would have had a committee I could have gone to, but they didn't. But my boss, Mike Sendall, who had a very bright, very smart, and very kind, and he had a twinkle in his eye, and he gave me space to do it. He said, "Why don't you just do it?" When he died, 10 years later or so, unfortunately, cancer, they went through his things, and they found a copy of my memo, and in the corner was written in his writing, in pencil, "Vague but exciting." So, thank goodness he didn't write exciting but vague, or maybe we would have no web today. But he let me play. So if you're wondering where innovation comes from, it comes from people being given the time to play. And I was given the time to play, and I used the Next machine. Who remembers the black Next machine? The black, not so many. It was a wonderful machine, fantastic computer for developing things on. It was a product of Steve Jobs when he left Apple. He started Next. I got one of those machines, took it out of the box in September of 1990, and by 2 months later, about the middle of November, I had basically a web browser running. In fact, it wasn't just a web browser, it was a web editor, because I thought that it sort of worked like a WYSIWYG, a normal word processor where you could actually sort of make headings and things. You could save it back. You didn't have to write. My assumption was nobody would have to write these angle bracket things. That would all be hidden back. And in fact, I was shocked later when people picked up and started writing HTML, as I called it, by hand. So I defined HTML, which is the markup language that's used for the hypertext documents. I defined a new protocol for the internet, HTTP, just like there was NNTP for network news, and there was SMTP for mail transfer, and I defined HTTP for hypertext transfer. And the most important piece actually was these URIs, I called them UDIs, Now you call them often URLs. The things that often start HTTP : those, I defined those to be, and I had the rule that basically anything of value, any document out there which was of value, you had to give one of those URLs to. And you had to run a program at the computer in the domain name part of the URL, which if I asked for that document, if my computer browser asked the document, it would send it back, probably in HTML or in other formats. So there it was. That was the basic design. And I don't know whether I've never really I've never been in a bobsled team, but I've looked at them on TV on the Olympics, and it seems to me that when you're in a bobsled team, when it starts off, it's really hard work getting it moving. And the web project was a bit like that, persuading people that it would be a good idea and it wouldn't be too confusing. So when you're doing the bobsled, you push, and it takes a lot of effort to get it going, and then you're pushing and pushing, trying to get it going more, and then there's a really critical point that you will have to notice. And I imagine these bobsled teams train for this, because at a certain point, it is starting to move faster and faster, and also it is starting to go downhill more and more. And there's a point, so then it's picking up speed, and then you have to jump in and steer. And for the web, that jumping in and steer was around 1992, 93, 94. And so by 1994, for the web, steering meant setting up an industry consortium, so all the companies who really were excited about this could get together. So that was the, if you like, the start. And now we're more than 20 years later. That consortium, W3C, is now doing all sorts of cool things. You can go to w3.org and look at them. You'll see that the HTML, which I originally wrote on a piece of paper a bit like this, except it was, of course, a web page. HTML is now at HTML5, which is a really thick document. So if you're designing web pages now, then who in the audience designs web pages? Yeah? Yeah, keep it up. It's going to get more and more exciting, because HTML5 is not just a new version of HTML, but if you've been around the web, you'll see that web pages are now not just static documents. They're very dynamic, because each web page it's like a computer. It's that you can program each web page. So when developers, these people who raise their hands when they create web pages, they write programs which run in a web page, just like you write a program to run on a computer. So each of these web pages, of which there are a lot, there are more web pages out there than neurons in your brain. And of course, the number of web pages is going up, and the number of neurons in our brain is going down. So kind of the battle is lost. So not only are there lots more web pages out there every moment, but also some of them are getting really complex, and they're things which you interact with, and there's a lot of data hidden behind them. So that's one of the things that's happening now. HTML5 and what we call the Open Web Platform. Other really interesting movements. Open data. I spent 2009 realizing that, there was a lot of documents on the web, but the data, in the sense, there's no data on the web in the form that I can use it. There's a lot of things which are based on data out there, but if you look at governments and or scientific projects, behind them there's a lot of data, and we weren't sharing the data. So I've been agitating, and I have on this tour a whole lot, talked to governments about getting data online, talk to industry about getting data online, talk to academics about when they publish a paper, don't just publish the paper, but and hopefully publish the paper so it's free, so anybody can download it. But also the data you used to do the experiment, publish that, because that is, for scientists, the paper is they can read the paper and be interested, but if they can get hold of the data, they combine it with more data and actually make much more exciting things. So so if you look at the web today, there are these exciting ways in which it's becoming. The web of data is becoming very powerful. One of the things which we're seeing now is people are building more and more powerful applications which are built on top of the web of data and give you a really nice user interface. And of course, the power of the HTML5 platform, also it's got its scalable vector graphics, SVG built into it, and more and more powerful style sheet language, CSS, the cascading style sheets, All those things give you a lot of power for building the user interface, and then you've got this more and more richer world of data underneath which you can use to actually provide the content. When you think of it, if you think of data being boring, actually, data, when you look at the, the exciting things you do every morning, some of you before you even get out of bed, and you go to your favorite social networking site, and you go and make a few more people your friends. That's data. When I am now provisionally friends with this person, I have confirmed my friendship with this person. This photograph was taken by this person and edited by this person and commented on this person, and it's got this person's face in it right here. That's all data. So everybody who's using social networking sites, in fact, one of the things you're doing is actually you're creating user-generated data. In fact, you don't notice it because it's not boring, because it's data which is relevant to you. And the way we're going to end up doing a lot of things is, in fact, through communicating by sharing data. When you connect, when you comment on things, when you like things, or then you're adding little pieces of data, and you're communicating with other people through shared data. And at the same time, you're telling the computer about it. That's what's interesting about communicating through shared data, rather than communicate just through English. English is really cool, and you can use poetry when you communicate with English. When you communicate by sharing data, then it's not so poetic, but the computer can help you. So now you can ask the computer, okay, show me all the pictures where I am the picture with somebody that I was at school with, or something like that. So of course there are lots of issues. I bet we'll get to discuss issues like privacy and such on the panel. So I got a feeling that we probably got questions like that coming, so I won't take our time with them now. But so going to tomorrow, no, I'm not going to predict. I don't do predictions because I think it's so much more valuable for us to think about what we want than try and guess what's happening. Guessing what's happening is a mug's game, because you can be so easily wrong. However, saying what you want actually is, in a way, more useful exercise. So I hope that what happens is that you end up thinking then about what and in a way you, the City of Sydney, end up thinking what you want out of all of this. And realize that you've got the power to decide it. One of the things which is really critical is to what extent we take this whole internet thing for granted, just assume it's like the air around us, or recently the rain, which you can depend on. But we arrived a few days ago and thought we had nothing else. Nice to see that the weather's improved recently. But a lot of people thought that the air and the internet were similar recently, until the Mubarak regime in Egypt disconnected Egypt from the internet. And then a lot of people realized, whoa, if they can turn off Egypt, who can turn us off? Who has this master switch to my country? Who do I depend on? Whose good faith do I have to rely on to continue to have the internet? If all my social life, and in fact, all my emergency preparedness and all the things that I really care a lot about my life happen through this internet, who do I rely on to make sure that I have connectivity? Who will turn it off? Who can turn it off? And also, people started asking, never mind turning it off, what else is being done? What other control is there? One of the things we have to test, how much power are we going to give our government to block different sites? I know that's been a big discussion around in Australia, in lots of countries, although perhaps not so much. In some countries there's not a lot of discussion about it, like in China there's not a lot of discussion about it, but in more and more countries, well, in fact in China I'm sure there's a lot of discussion about the censorship. And I think some countries where there's a lot more censorship, they tend to move towards more openness. Also, very important is the discussion about spying. Some countries, the government lets you go to any website you like. It's just that if you go to the wrong one, then they will watch you. They will hack your accounts. They will find out who your friends are. And not only you will go to jail, but all your friends will go to jail too. So if you're going to give a government the ability to spy on people and the ability to block different websites, well then, boy, you've got to have a lot of trust in that government. That's not the sort of thing I recommend. Right? What I'd like to see is just as you have the I think you may be getting the message. Just as the press is the fourth estate sometimes is no, it's called the fourth estate because it's supposed to be independent of all the other estates, whatever they are, so it's generally considered important in a democracy for the press to be independent of government and independent of moneyed interests, big business and wealthy people. Similarly, the internet has to be an independent medium. It should be a white sheet of paper. It should allow you to do whatever you want on it, and it should not have anybody particularly controlling. So when we asked what are about the future, I say, think about what sort of future you want. A lot of that is about who controls your internet, who blocks it, and who spies on it. And apart from that, when you look at the web, okay, this thing, you're looking at a computer, which is programmable. Remember, my parents back in the 50s, they were excited because you could do anything with a computer. A lot of people nowadays, when they get a computer, take a computer out, they open it up. I think a lot of kids nowadays, they just treat it as an appliance, like a fridge. It's white goods. You just open it, and if it works, if it doesn't work, hey mom, can you fix my computer? If it doesn't have the things in it you want, then you restock it, you get some apps, you get some music, you get some pictures. And you don't think about the fact that it could be reprogrammed. So my last poll. So who in the audience here has ever written a program for a computer in any programming language whatsoever in their lives? Yes, we have a fairly strong geek flavor here. Okay, yes, maybe 25%, 25%. Okay, so for you, your rights, for other people, they have the right of expression and on the internet, and the right not to be spied on, not to be blocked. But for you, you have another right, the right, the geek right, the right of a programmer, the right to have root on your machine. Okay, the right to be able to install whatever program you want, and the right to be able to write programs. Okay, you have a duty too, because you can write programs. You can make that computer do whatever you want it to do. You have a duty to think all the time, whenever you look at the computer, especially when it really bugs you in the way it's behaving. Okay, realize that you could, if it's this open source, you could just download the source and you could fix it. Okay, or you can invent a completely different way of working with this computer, and you could code it up and make it. Okay, computers are wonderful challenges because what we do with the computer is limited only by your imagination. And that's the challenge to you. And if you're somebody who codes, and we need more people who code, that, by the way, and that means we need lots of people, especially girls, in school, learning computer science, not learning. Get in there. Computer science is not boyish, right? It is very cool, and it is not gender specific. Go for it. Lots of girls are absolutely great at it. Great. And I don't have time to give you a long list of all the great girl programmers there have been. Okay. So we have these people who can program, and for the others of you who didn't lift up your hands, you can think about how you'd like the computer to do things differently. It's just that when then you have to write it up, blog about it, and you can either learn to program, it's never too late, or you can go and talk to one of the people who who they are. They are the people who hold up their hands. They're the people who can code. Go to them and say, "Excuse me, you're a programmer. I have a suggestion. The world could be a different place if we had computer programs that did things like this, that allowed us to work together like this. Maybe you'll have maybe a better way of coding up your computer so that it will make healthcare better, maybe democracy better. Maybe you'll be able to find a way. You'll imagine a way of using computers that will allow people to connect to people of other countries and others, and get to understand them, and get to the extent that they don't want to go and fight them and drop bombs on them. And that would be awesome. And that would be a major thing for you to set your sights on for the next few years. Thank you very much for your attention.